Joining me now to discuss all of this are Premier Brad Wall from Saskatchewan and Robert Ghiz from Prince Edward Island. Welcome to the House.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So the Labour Minister says you haven't stepped up to the plate. What do you make of that remark?
Well, I think it's adversarial, but that's fine if they want to take that approach. I think if you really look at where the jobs are created in our provinces, they have to do with a lot of local economies, local trade, and I think that provinces are doing a good job. And we do have a model that is working. You know, while I'm encouraged that the federal government wants to get involved and help improve the system, I don't think that they should take something that isn't broken and try and get rid of it.
Jason Kenney is the new minister in charge of many of the files that were talked about this week in terms of the Canada Job Grant, employment insurance reform, temporary foreign workers. Premier Wall, what kind of federal program would it take to help meet these unique regional challenges that all of these provincial economies face?
Well, Robert's right. We've had some success, although I think we all can be doing a better job in terms of training for opportunity rather than more sort of general training. And so what happens currently is working. Would we all like to do better? Yes. Would we like the federal government to be a meaningful partner in that? Yes. The principles behind the Canada Job Grant, especially the two that include ensuring that training goes to opportunity, that we're not, that we're providing skills that people can deploy immediately, get a job, start building their career. That's the first principle. Obviously, we agree with that as provinces. So do employers. Most importantly, so do employees or prospective employees. The second principle behind the Canada Job Grant is that we should have employers involved to a greater extent. We also agree with that. Roberts made the point, though, that if in the achievement of those principles in some sort of new initiative, we move away from some labor market agreement investments that are working, and they are in Saskatchewan as well, that's a problem. You know, in Saskatchewan, we have 3.9% unemployment, but amongst Aboriginal people, we have 12% unemployment. And so those LMAs are integral. But by the way, that 12% now, a year ago, it was 15. We're making progress because we've increased funding to the Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technology by 48%. We have LMA agreements that we're able to invest in basic skills together with the federal government. So it's working. And we're saying to the federal government, look, you've got some good principles there. We don't reject those, but let's make sure we're not taking away from what works in order to achieve them.
Premier Ghiz, last week we heard from Nova Scotia Premier Darrell Dexter talk about changes to the EI program and how they were leading to a further hollowing out of the seasonal workforce, which is probably something you can also relate to in Prince Edward Island. What progress are you making in getting the federal government to talk about reversing those changes?
Well, I've had the opportunity, I'll give credit where credit's due, to meet with the Prime Minister at least once on this subject. And I've let him know that Atlantic premiers, and I know now Quebec as well, are doing research on the impact on our seasonal industries. Now, I will say this. I'm a realist. The EI system needs fixing. It probably has been used in ways that it shouldn't be over the last number of years. The argument I'm making is that within our economy, our three largest industries are still agriculture, fisheries, and tourism. They're all seasonal in nature. We need people that are able to work in our fish plants for 20 weeks when it's lobster season, then take off 10 weeks, then come back and work another 15 weeks with something else. If we don't have that, then we can't process our lobster. But I use the line all the time. We do not grow potatoes or catch lobsters in the month of January. But from that perspective, I think it's important that the EI system recognize our seasonal industries, but also make sure that it encourages people to work. I'm saying that some of the changes and thought processes that the federal government's looking at to improve the EI system is on the right track. But similar to the Canada Jobs Grant, they should go out and consult with the provinces and do some research before they just automatically implement something.
So what kind of progress has been made in trying to get those to refine what the changes that they're making to suit regional economies like yours?
So far, very slow. But as long as I have the opportunity to meet with the Prime Minister and to make our arguments, that's something that can be beneficial. And if he's changed the system once, he can change it again.
It's a difficult country to govern. We have such disparate economic interests. It's such a large country. You know, in Saskatchewan, we we do have a labor shortage. We have about 10,000 jobs, I think, unfulfilled today on the website, saskjobs.ca. So our first priority is to get people in province, many of them, for example, First Nations, Métis, but those not employed. That's the first obvious source for labor. Second, though, is other Canadians. We'd like to see them be moving to the province to help us meet our labor shortage.
You don't want to suck away his fish.
Well, that's the challenge. But that's the challenge. We here's what we do though instead. It's sort of all of the above for us. By the way, we're trying all of it because that's how acute the shortage is. So our employers fly over a region of the country that has 9-10% unemployment on the way to Ireland. We're grateful that those Irish workers come. They're great. Many of them become permanent residents. It's how this country was built. So that's all good because it is all of the above in terms of a labor shortage. More of our own, more from the rest of Canada, more from around the world. But, the employment insurance program is what that region has now, as Robert has said. So I wish we had something else. I wish insurance is to me, it's about something unexpected. And what Robert has just described is not unexpected. And I'm not being critical of that position. I completely understand it. If I was in his shoes, I'd be saying the same thing. But, this is the longer-term solution is we need something other than EI to deal with that seasonal reality in Atlantic Canada.
Which again illustrates that there isn't a one-size-fits-all for Canada.
It's a big country.
Exactly. But I will say this, that if you go to today, the Charlottetown Airport, the Halifax Airport, the Fredericton Airport, the Moncton Airport, or the St. John's Newfoundland Airport, you will discover that there are people getting on planes every day to go out and work in Saskatchewan and Alberta.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that the West is booming today. You got to remember, you got to look at things in a historical manner. Back in the early 1900s, it was Atlantic Canada that was thriving, and we were trying to help out the West. Today, the West is thriving, and I want to see Brad's economy continue to grow. I want to make sure that, as you say, the one size doesn't fit all, and Brad's very accommodating, and I appreciate what Brad's doing for our economy with the policies he has in Saskatchewan. I want to see Saskatchewan, Alberta capitalize on the resources that they have because I think it benefits our whole country.
Now, you two have been working closely together all year on healthcare, on the Premier's Healthcare Innovation Group. What were you able to accomplish this year? Premier Wall?
Sure. Well, it's been about 18 months. It started when the premiers got together in Victoria and said, Wall and Ghiz, you have 6 months to deliver some real results on healthcare innovation because the federal government had made its decisions with respect to transfer, and we just decided as provinces, Canadians want better health and they want it sustainable for the long term. So what can we do about that? Provinces had really not looked over their respective fences until then. We hadn't really sat down and said, what can we cooperate on? What best practices out there represent this confluence between better care and more sustainability, maybe even bending the cost curve? Can we buy stuff together? Can we? So, you have highlighted that we have been working for some time together. This year, we're going to move further on brand names. We're going to work to get about 17 more brand names. It won't be Robert and I. There's 3 new co-chairs from the Premier's table taking over. We're making some recommendations around appropriateness to the committee. The Premiers have agreed that the new working group will focus on appropriate. Simply means are Canadians getting the appropriate care they should be getting, informed by practice guidelines, clinical practice guidelines. So the first one we're going to focus on is diagnostics. The radiologists tell us now, not finance ministry officials, the radiologists tell us that 10 to 15% of diagnostics are, especially in terms of lower back, minor head trauma, and uncomplicated headaches, but 10 to 15% overall are likely unnecessary. And so, let's find that out. That's not good for a patient to go through tests that they don't need. And can we save upwards of $200 million in the bargain? Yeah, we think we might be able to nationwide.
Yeah, you said Saskatchewan alone would be about $10 million a year.
So.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's dollars we can reinvest in long-term care and home care, our home care pilots we have. So we've also, Robert has certainly been advocating that we engage pharmacists to a greater extent in the country, so we've recommended that. And Robert's also been focused on seniors care issues, especially home care, and so the group is going to focus on those. Some of the other things the group's been doing up to date, CPGs, clinical practice guidelines, team-based models, those will continue to be the focus, but of the health minister's table. We want the Premier's-led group to really focus on 3 areas where we think we can achieve results for Canadians quickly.
Premier Ghiz, I understand there's a bit of there's going to be a focus going forward on dementia.
As part of seniors care, we know that within Canada, we have an aging population and that healthcare costs are being driven by our population that is over the age of 65. So we need to be able to combat that as we move into the future. And whether or not it's dementia, we're looking at different areas around how the aging population, we can reduce down costs around chronic disease. There's a lot of different areas that we're able to explore here. And just to give you some easy numbers, to have a senior in a hospital bed for a night is around $1,000 a night. To have them in a long-term care bed is approximately $150. To have them at their home where we're providing home care is approximately $55 a day. So we need to do more to be able to try to deliver the appropriate care actually to our seniors that's going to make their lives better, but also make the healthcare system more sustainable in the long run.
And finally, I just have to ask one question about the Senate. This week, Premier Wall made a
The
presentation.
Senate, is that thing still around?
Apparently, it's still around, although I'm sure you don't want it to be. Premier Wall made a presentation to premiers about it and the idea of abolishing it. What did you make of that, Premier Ghiz? What did you make of his presentation?
Well, I have a lot of respect for Brad. I think he'd make a great senator. No,
What a terrible thing to say.
Edward Island.
there could be. My point of view is, and I think that Brad talked about this in the past, was that he was originally for a Triple E Senate, with the main word that he thinks is important is equal. And from my perspective, that's what I'm for. But his opinions evolved now to abolishing the Senate, probably for a good common reason, and that is that who's ever going to tackle Senate reform? It's probably not going to happen. But then again, we need to wait for the Supreme Court to come back with their decision on how we're even going to abolish it if we want to. My opinion's this. Someday we're going to have leadership in our country that's going to want to tackle national issues again. I'll give Bram Rooney credit and Joe Clark. They tried to do it, whether it was Meech Lake or Charlottetown, whether you agree or not agree. They put a great effort into it. Then you had Chrétien and Martin, who there was fatigue amongst the general public when it came to constitutional issues. Harper, who has no interest in dealing with these things, even though he likes to say that he's for them, even though he doesn't want to consult on them. So I think that someday there will be someone out there. And I would like to get back to what the Senate is really supposed to be about, and that is about representing the regions of our country. I think that if we ever do, my first choice would be Senate reform. But if you can't get a Senate to function, well, then I would agree with Brad. But I'm still going to say I want to see Senate reform at some point down the road.
There is one bicameral government in the world that we're aware of. I stand to be corrected. Our officials have canvassed sort of the systems of government around the world. One bicameral system where senators are appointed other than ours. It's Malaysia, and it's the minority of their Senate is appointed. Most of are elected. You know, I think this is a bit of an anachronism at this point. And if we can't meaningfully reform it, Robert's right, that's the preference, especially that middle E in the Triple E Senate reform we've wanted, that many have been aspirants to, not just in the West, but in Atlantic Canada. But if we can't do it, then it's $100 million. And frankly, it's harming the democratic process. As each time a scandal breaks in the Senate, or even prior to the scandals, any frustration with the Senate because it's appointed, because it's very partisan, because those senators don't represent the regions necessarily. They're there as part of a parliamentary caucus, and therefore their votes are whipped. You know, at some point you just have to say, is this serving democracy, or is it actually kind of backing us up in terms of wanting Canadians to be engaged, proud of their public, proud of the democratic system?
Thank you both for joining me here today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Brad Wall is the Premier of Saskatchewan, and Robert Ghiz is the Premier of Prince Edward Island.